All right, it is 11:30, so I think we should go ahead and start this round. Congratulations to all of you for making it to finals. It seems like everyone except Christopher is here, but Christopher is double entered, as they've already said, and so I think it's time we start at the top and get started with Caroline.
Hi, can you see and hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Um, I will not be needing any time signals. Are all my judges ready? Perfect. Thank you. The other day, I was at the mall with one of my best friends, Alex. Our friend Spencer spotted us conveniently near Spencer's and ran up to us and said, "Hold the phone. Are y'all dating?" And I immediately, ugh, you know the feeling. No, 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 we are not. We're just friends, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Plus, he does Congress, and I have standards. We place all of our attention on being in a relationship instead of having just a few good friends. And being asked that question almost gave me severe heart palpitations. And coincidentally, that's what will happen to us if we don't have any friends at all. According to a Swedish study of more than 13,000 men and women, Health Day on December 31st, 2020, found that having few or no close friends increased the risk of having a first time heart attack by almost 50%. And I know being a true friend is hard. Too often, we don't acknowledge the difficulty of being a genuine, caring, and empathetic person. It is crucial that we work on becoming better friends, or else we're all gonna die. So, today, to avoid death, let's first go to the mall and analyze what friends can do for our physical and mental health, then shop and search for two types of special friendships, and finally, purchase some solutions for the interpersonal crisis. Come on, besties, let's do this. Alex has been my bestie for almost 5 years now. His support has been phenomenal, and he's helped me through some of my toughest times. After receiving a 74 on a math exam, a subsequent breakdown followed, but he hyped me up by saying, "Caroline, I actually failed. You will be fine." Yes, it was just a math exam, and yes, I'm Asian, but it got me thinking about how our friendships impact us both physically and mentally. First, our mental health is substantially impacted by friends. A 2017 study conducted by the Society for Research in Child Development showed that teenagers with close friendships are more adaptive to stress, happier, and have higher self esteem. In adults, a 2009 study by the National Medical Association found that social support lessened the rates of anxiety and depression. Hold on, you're telling me that if I have support, I'll be happier? Building human connections has been innate to society since cavemen. So it shouldn't surprise us that our friendships impact mental health as much, if not more, than our romantic partnerships can. There's no reason at all that platonic relationships should take up any less space in our lives than our romantic endeavors. And that's probably why I was so quick to deny anything between Alex and me. Besides, I'm 17 and I've never even had my first kiss before, so I'll keep dreaming about relationships. Second, let's delve into how our friends impact physical health. The current opinion in psychiatry reports in 2008 that people are more likely to eat fruits and vegetables, exercise regularly, and successfully quit smoking if they have friends. I can attest to this on my own. I've been smoke free for 20 years. Just kidding. During quarantine, my friends logged onto Zoom every single night to do our amazing exercise routine to TikTok star Chloe Ting. Get abs in 2 weeks, tiny waist workouts, exercising with my friends for a mere 45 minutes a day. Encouraged me to not only be more healthy, but deepen the connections with my girl squad. The psychology of our friends impacts our physical and mental health in astronomical ways. Surely surviving and thriving through a global pandemic has made that clear. Now, I have had my fair share of unhealthy friendships. A past unhealthy friendship I broke off was because this girl named Karen was using me for homework, and I should have known from that name. She would continuously make excuses as to why she couldn't do her work, and I would give in to her. The effects of this issue are palpable, universally, and the effect that many may fear about the interpersonal crisis: toxic friendships. I would later learn that my toxic relationship was a transactional friendship, one of the two potential platonic relationships. All relationships give and take something, but when the expectation of exchange is blurred, relationships become toxic. And that's not the only indicator of toxic friendships. According to psychotherapist Aaron Leonard, the danger of a toxic person is that they find ways to make their friend feel inferior, invisible, anxious, and even bad. Needless to say, my transactional friendship demonstrated manipulation and wasn't what a true interpersonal connection should have looked like. Second, let's review the other platonic relationship: transformational. In psychology, a transformational friendship is something that very much transforms you. Like, I may transform all of my friends into Taylor Swift fans or change their lives. I do both. Whereas transactional friendships focus on a task, transformational friendships focus on the message: to love, inspire, and care for the other. As clinical psychologist Catherine Aponte writes, transformational relationships are built around the notion of reciprocity. You solve my needs, I solve yours. These connections are about giving the most you can and helping others. Because when friendships are your reality, you value the people you're with and work as a team. Near the beginning of the pandemic, one of my best friends, Rohan, was more reserved and hesitant to bother anybody about his problems and his family struggles. Additionally, I was struggling with mental health issues such as depression and anxiety, but we both mutually supported each other, turning a transactional friendship into a transformational one. This goes to show that no friendship can exist when it's only one sided. Therefore, it is imperative to understand how to make friends and how to keep them. Let's be better friends and, in return, better people. First, let's understand how to be a better friend. An article by Harvard University on July 1st, 2021 offers key steps to ensure you can keep a friend while being a good one too. The article offers an easy acronym to check in on your friends: HALT. No, don't actually stop, but ask your amigos if they are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. If they are any of these things, now you can stop and let them address those needs and then revisit the problem. Remember that no friendship is the same for everyone. So please, please, please be flexible and understand that people may be going through some tough times. Lastly, we need to understand the signs of a toxic friendship and know when enough is enough. Obviously, if someone isn't respecting the boundaries that you both set, please have that conversation with them, because oftentimes they will cross boundaries without knowing, and a conversation will help get the friendship back on track. But if you ever feel that you are in danger, minimize contact and escalate the situation if needed. If you ever see jealousy, obsession, or untrustworthiness happening, address it immediately and prioritize yourself and your own personal health. Because if you cannot practice self care, it will be nearly impossible to be a great friend to someone you may care about. Our society's obsession with independence is, quite frankly, ridiculous. We constantly look down upon those closest to us for collaborating and even romanticize toxic traits. But Instead, we need to reframe our mindsets, guide the ones closest to us, and focus on building meaningful connections. Because, quite frankly, death will be impending without our friends. So maybe I'll never date a congressperson, but that's okay because being best friends with one is way good enough. And if you don't have one, well, let's start here. Hi, my name is Caroline, and I'll be your new bestie after the round.
Awesome, great job. Let's go ahead and get the next person started. I don't think Christopher's back yet, so we'll just go to number 3, Isabel.
You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I won't be needing any time signal, so whenever you're ready.
Cool.
Donald Trump called it the greatest national security risk. So, naturally, I had to see what was so terrifying about TikTok. It seemed fine to me. 12-year-olds dancing to Taylor Swift. Amish people churning butter. And I even found videos by teens like me with health issues. I loved watching them embrace their bodies without apology. Until I saw the viewer comments. One comment attacked a disabled girl, saying, "She's clearly faking it." Another said, "It doesn't look like she needs that crutch." These videos showed people in pain, but viewers, with no proof, told them, "It's all in your head." It's all in your head. Even after a global pandemic claimed our way of life and our loved ones, we still doubt others when they say they're sick. Now, I don't blame this mentality on TikTok because it's everywhere. I think it too, and I live with a disability myself. But when others doubt us, we stop demanding the care we deserve. There's a clinical name for this. It's called medical gaslighting, and it's contagious. The colleague we silence because we resent their complaints. Our depressed classmate who's told, "All kids have mood swings during puberty." And even a previous president telling the country COVID-19 must be blown out of proportion because, hey, we've got it all under control. Medical activist Isabella Russo puts it best. When medical gaslighting happens, it can take years, if ever, to receive a proper diagnosis. So we doubt our pain and our sanity. We can't let one more person go unbelieved and unheard. So today, let's chart first how we experience medical gaslighting personally from those we know and even love. Next, how we experience it professionally from the healthcare system. Then finally, we'll learn to embrace a new diagnosis, one that comes from who and what we know best, ourselves. The term gaslighting comes from the movie Gaslight, where a man makes his wife doubt her own sanity. His obvious plot to kill her must be all in her head. You remember that movie? We watched it together. Are you feeling okay? But seriously, this is the first way we experience our problem, from our everyday friends and loved ones. But why would we dismiss a sick friend? Well, when 90% of pain and disability is invisible, it can be hard to trust. But there's a deeper frustration. We often feel the need to heal others, even when we're not expected to. We're scared, and we're helpless. So we hope that it's all under heads. How many times has a trusted coworker called in sick and we assumed they were faking it? According to the Career Builder study, 43% of employers thought their workers were lying on sick days. And so, the truly sick remain on the job, too scared to ask for the help they need. But We even tell our friends their imaginations are too big. According to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, 1 in 2 women experience extreme menstrual pains, and all of them said that they've been dismissed by their friends at some point. When even our closest allies won't believe us, who will? Well, apparently not our family members either. On Healthline, Meghna Rao shared her story of extreme depression during high school. But when she finally told her mother, Meghna said she scoffed. And she's a healthcare professional. When medical gaslighting darkens our jobs, social lives, and even our very own families, it's time we accept our new age of cynicism and disbelief doesn't make us savvier, just truly sickening. Speaking of sickening, have you seen those poor doctors on Grey's Anatomy? They've been through so much. Plane crashes, cyber attacks, terrorists loose in the operating room. They never tell them it's all in their heads, and they always put the patient first. In real life too, we've seen doctors risk their lives every day for us during this pandemic. Yes, doctors are amazing, but the healthcare system can make the patients who need it most feel dismissed, neglected, and gaslit. And that's the second way we experience our problem from the medical establishment. An actual medical textbook used until 2018 said Hispanic people, quote, have a history of trafficking drugs, so be careful when prescribing medication. About Black people, it said, quote, Blacks feel lower pain intensities than other races. The implication being, for people of color, pain is imaginary or an excuse to get drugs. While doctors may not choose to gaslight, racial and gender stereotypes are rampant. Anyone can be hurt by the racism and sexism of medicine. Even Serena Williams, she faced life-threatening pregnancy complications and was told the pain medication was making her confused. When Serena Williams, with all her power and respect, can be racially gaslit, imagine how the average woman of color is treated. The Guardian profiled Susan Moore, a Black woman and a doctor herself, who went to the hospital with extreme COVID-19 symptoms. But when she told her doctor she was short of breath, he called her a drug addict and denied her care. On December 4th, 2020, Susan filmed a video saying, I maintain if I was white, this wouldn't have happened to me. Then she passed away. Finally, a condition even her doctors couldn't deny. I've heard it's all in your head a lot. For years, I went through pain with doctors telling me that I was just being dramatic. And I believed them. Why wouldn't I? I was a little girl and they were grown-ups with medical degrees. And so I believed I was crazy. And it drove me to hate myself. And that hatred hurt more than any physical pain ever could. The thing is, get this, I wasn't crazy. And it took them 5 years to even run the tests that had them find out I have a life-threatening chronic illness that could have been treated this whole time. I'm not sharing this for pity, but for awareness. Because according to the Organization for My Condition, the Ehlers-Danlos Society, the average time it takes to get diagnosed with vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is 40 years. The average life expectancy is 48 years. Those were 40 years of you're faking it, of you don't look sick, of it's all in your heads. If one friend, doctor, or family member had just stopped and said, I believe you, then maybe Kate Simmons, Jacqueline Addis, Taylor Keaton, Brian Woolard, Claire Muncy, Lisa Yaga, Amy Dean Williamson, Haiti Faith Gray, Jillian Studley, Jennifer Nye, all people who died too young of this disease because they were disbelieved, would be here with us today. We all have the power to say, I believe you. And we must also believe that saying it can be a lasting and transformative solution. We can't cure or often diagnose our loved ones, but we can reassure them that what they feel is real. But when we're the ones met with, "I don't believe you," from the healthcare system, remember, we know our bodies better than anyone else. A 2017 study by Science Daily found that our brains can test when we're sick before we show any obvious symptoms to others. It can be hard to accept, but doctors are fallible human beings. This doesn't make them evil, but if your symptoms are dismissed, remember, it's okay to get a second opinion and keep advocating for the care you deserve. So those TikTok videos were pretty upsetting. I mean, 12-year-olds dancing to Taylor Swift is enough to make anyone sick. But those brave kids posting about their journeys can teach us to fight a true threat. We can learn to validate instead of denigrate others' pain. We can believe. A speech coach once told me the greatest compliment we can get as orators is "I believe you." So here, today, let's trust each other. Let's trust our words, our pain, our stories, and most of all, ourselves. Because I believe you. Thank you.
Awesome, great job. Let's go ahead and get to the next. That is Charlotte. Or, yeah.
Hi, I'm next. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Yeah, sorry about that. 1 second. Just give me a second to set up.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. Can you see me, hear me okay? Okay. And whenever you guys are all ready. Okay. When I was in 6th grade, my mom thought I was ready for the talk. It was awful. In fact, her version of the talk meant taking me into the living room, plugging her laptop into the TV, and going through a PowerPoint she had created. Like, yes, and when two people love each other very much, I'm still scarred. So clearly, I still had no idea what was going on. To be fair, I was 11. Still thought boys had cooties, which I'm in high school now and still think I'm wrong. But my mom reassured me that my school would teach me everything she couldn't. Unfortunately, the only sex ed classes my school teaches are in 7th grade science class, where we colored in a penis and called it a day. And that's not a joke. An October 2020 publication from the National Conference of State Legislators found that only 30 states, plus the District of Columbia, require that public schools teach sex ed. And even if they do, the sex education students receive varies from state to state. For example, consent is an important part of sex ed, but because it's so widely debated across the United States, most of the time it's not taught in schools. Which is why on January 18th, 2018, the Seattle Times reported that nearly 40% of people didn't learn what consent was until adulthood. The gap between the sex education students should receive and what they actually receive is wide. So today, let's first take a look at the causes of our education gap. Next, examine the effects of being uninformed, and finally, explore some solutions. So, yeah, talking with sex with students is a bit awkward, but it's something we need to do to keep us safe, especially from bad PowerPoints made by our moms. Truth be told, I was a pretty sheltered kid. In fact, I thought the F word stood for frap for like 6 years. The Starbucks barista was so confused, and honestly, me too. So let's take a look at the causes. Our parents aren't talking to us, and our schools aren't teaching us. First, our parents don't know how to talk to us about sex and consent. The University of Washington, in a 1997 study, explains that most of the time parents are afraid of talking to their kids about sex, so they don't. Then, 15 years later in 2012, Planned Parenthood discovered that still 71% of teenagers had never had the sex talk with their parents. And finally, in 2017, the Making Caring Common project found that 61% of teens had never talked to their parents about the concept of consent. Our parents have always been afraid of talking to us, so we're left in the dark. Next, because our parents don't want to talk to us, they leave it to schools. But schools also fail. In fact, according to a December 31st, 2020 article from Simple Health, most schools have terrible sex ed programs, like mine. Abstinence, abstinence, abstinence. Thank you. I learned so much. Still don't really know how a period works, but I guess I'll abstain from that too. But seriously, as much as I want to joke, the Sexual Education and Information Council of the United States finds that because our sex education varies from state to state, students lack access to a comprehensive sex ed. And to make it worse, the Guttmacher Institute of January 15th, 2020 reveals that only 8 states, plus the District of Columbia, require that public schools integrate consent into their sex ed curriculum. So our parents aren't talking to us, and our schools are failing us. And I'm tired of failing. First chemistry, then geometry, and now this. My GPA is so low. While I was researching for this speech, I tried to bring up sex with my parents. It did not go well. To be fair, I may have approached it wrong. Lesson learned. Don't bring up sex at the dinner table when your grandma's in town. So let's take a look at the effects. Students don't know what consent looks like, and teenagers are getting hurt. First, students don't know what consent looks like. They also don't know what deodorant looks like. What? It's not rude, it's just true. I mean, seriously, have you ever walked into a speech and debate tournament in a cafeteria at like 10 p.m.? It's awful. I blame the LDers. Though most of us think we know what consent looks like, we really don't. And we carry that into our adult lives. As a March 2015 poll conducted by the Washington Post finds, 22% of college students believe that as long as someone doesn't say no, they have therefore consented to sex. And 18% of college students think that if someone consents to kissing or touching, they've consented to all further sexual activity. And that's just not true. As the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network reminds us on November 1st, 2020, consent is an ongoing process of discussing boundaries and your comfort level. But most of us don't know that, and that's dangerous. Next, teenagers are getting hurt. And most of the time, this is because they don't know what consent is supposed to look like. As a 2019 special report from Education Week reveals, the overwhelming majority of high school students have never been taught about consent and don't understand it. And our lack of knowledge is dangerous. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it's okay to withhold knowledge from kids, like about Santa, or the Tooth Fairy, or the strength of the American democracy. But this is not one of those times. And because we withhold knowledge, the National Education Association of December 2017 finds that nearly 17,000 reports of sexual abuse have been filed in our grade schools in the span of 4 years. And we have to fix that. In 7th grade, I took the most basic version of sex education. We learned what our parts were called, but never learned anything about consent. This fall, I spoke to my advisor and learned that that is the only sex ed my school offers. If not for this speech, I wouldn't have learned what consent is actually supposed to look like. And most students never will. So let's fix that. Solutions for the classroom and at home. First, in the classroom. All schools need to teach comprehensive, consent-focused sex education because it works. As the New Jersey Department of Education explains on their website, last accessed August 19th, 2021, we can see that in New Jersey, all public schools are required to integrate consent into their sex ed classes. And as a result, a 2021 World Population Review study highlights that New Jersey has some of the lowest rates of sexual assault and rape in the nation, at only 17 reports per 100,000 people. It's clear that this works, and we need to put it into all of our schools. Chances are, if you're in this room, you're a parent, teacher, or student. Parents, talk to your child's school board or PTA about their sex ed classes. Teachers, talk to school administrators about what you can do to put consent into your school's sex ed. And students, use your voices, because we don't use them too much of the time. Next, if you're not involved in education, you can work in your own home with parents, teaching older kids about sexual relationships and younger kids about the concept of consent while they're young. And to clarify, no, I do not mean you should tell a 5-year-old what sex is. Trust me, tried that with my younger brother. Next day, my mom got a phone call from his teacher and I got grounded. Instead, you can follow what Parents Together, a nonprofit organization, states to do on August 12th, 2021, where they say the best way to teach consent to young kids is to model it. So respect their personal space and make sure they respect other people's. Next time at the family reunion, if your kid doesn't want to hug Great Uncle Ed, don't make them. That's how we model consent. And when students do learn what sex is, the Harvard Graduate School of Education states on December 19th, 2018, that the best thing you can do is give them all of the information they need. So be honest with them about what sexual harassment and assault is. Answer all of their questions and continue to let them know you're someone they can talk to. Because the best way to protect us is to talk to us. My brother turns 12 next year, which means he's gonna get the talk from my mom next. I really hope she got rid of the PowerPoint, for his sake. Today, we looked at how our current approach to sex ed and consent is failing students by taking a look at the causes, effects, and solutions. This year, I found speech and debate and learned that I can spread word about things I'm passionate about. So I've spoken to my school, my parents, and now you. Let's continue to keep our kids safe, one awkward, frappin' conversation at a time. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, and great job. If we want to go back up, let's get to Christopher.
Good afternoon. I just want to make sure, can everyone hear me well and see me properly? Awesome. And are all my judges ready? For most kids, the first few years of our life probably feels like it's as good as it can get. No need to worry about grades or class ranks, or worst of all, NSDA campus. Back when late nights were sleepovers and watching TV, rather than pulling all-nighters for school. But a life that so many kids take for granted, the ability to live freely as a child and be treated as one, isn't a luxury provided to everybody. For a lot of children, that perceived childhood innocence isn't granted at all. Adultification bias, in which Black children are seen and treated as older and more mature than our white peers, strips the ability to be a child away from children across the globe. Research from Texas A&M University shows that from schooling to policing, Black kids are viewed as older and less innocent than our white peers. So today, let's take a trip of our own. Let's head to the playground and take a look at why society refuses to let Black kids be kids. Let's tire ourselves out there. Look at how tiring these effects can be. Before we get some rest of our own, look at what we can do to put this problem to rest for good. So that children can be granted what seems to be the privilege of childhood. And on the topic of playgrounds, I'm sure everyone has heard the phrase, boys will be boys in at least one of them. Used to explain away basically everything under the assumption that children and teenagers are rowdy and immature by nature. But for some reason, this phrase only seems to apply to a certain type of boy. Those of a lighter hue, so to speak. as that narrative starts to fall through when it comes to Black youth, as one 2014 APA study shows us. The study asked 264 university students, most of which being white, after presenting them with photos of people ranging from infancy to adulthood, to guess the age and gauge the innocence of each person in each image. By the age of 10, participants had already begun to see Black boys as older than they were, although estimating their ages by 5 years on average. And this effect is only demonstratively worse in young Black girls, with Georgetown Law's Center on Poverty and Inequality finding in 2019 that this stratification bias starts at the age of 5. Adults believe that Black girls need less protection, nurturing, and support than our white peers at almost all stages of development. In both cases, these instances of research show us one thing. During critical periods of growth, as the brain is still developing, harmful views and expectations already begin to be placed on Black youth. We're presumed to be more responsible for our actions and face harsher consequences for them. By the age of 13, Black children are already often viewed and treated as if we were adults, even in the playground. A few questions for our audience this afternoon. I'm certain that all of you can agree that playing dodgeball is a relatively normal thing for kids, right? And as much as we all hated it as children, there have been a few times where we have accidentally been hit with the ball. Regardless, while these would be normal behaviors for any child, the same cannot be said for those who live in Detroit, Michigan, where police charged 10-year-old Bryce Denley with aggravated assault and battery, throwing a ball that hit another student. In fact, in that same Texas A&M study I mentioned at the start of my speech, one instance was detailed in which a young Black girl struggled to find universities and even elementary schools prior that would accept her for the exact same reason. An allegation of assault and battery permanently on her record, because who knew that dodgeball was a crime? From schooling to policing, disparities begin to emerge in how Black children are treated, with lasting effects. And when I say from schooling to policing, I mean it literally. Repeated discipline in schools pushes children towards the juvenile justice system, especially in cases like this, where they find childhoods criminalized, where they face legal charges for the crime of being a child. And it only gets worse when it comes to repeated suspensions. Research from Gullet Interrupted shows that students who are suspended are more likely to face arrest on days that they're suspended as a result of said suspension. It shows that students who are repeatedly suspended are more likely to drop out, and that they're more likely to come into contact with the justice system later in their lives. A 2017 study in the Sociology of Education journal found that these types of suspensions are 2.7 times more likely for young Black girls, and 1.5 times more likely for young Black boys. Oftentimes for things that wouldn't have resulted in suspension for their white counterparts. That Black children overall are 2.6 times more likely to come into contact with the juvenile justice system. The continued impact of this treatment gets tiring for Black youth, and it can ultimately be traumatic, let alone deadly. Take the case of Makia Bryant, a 16-year-old Black girl shot dead in Columbus, Ohio. In every statement, the police department referred to her as a young woman, refusing to acknowledge the fact that she was a child, that she was barely, if at all, younger than the competitors in this room today. And yet, she was treated as if she was a grown adult woman. Time and time again, we see adultification bias in action. Not only was Makia Bryant's childhood literally stripped away from her, but it was taken again figuratively in words after she had passed. While 21-year-old Dylan Roof could be safely arrested and offered Burger King after killing 9 in 2015. While 17-year-old Carl Rittenhouse killed 2 and injured a third just last year after he and other militia members had been offered water by police. And while in March, after a 21-year-old gunman shot 8 people in 3 separate Atlantis parks, to have the sheriff's office chalk it up to having a bad day, defending him by saying he must have been pretty much fed up. There is no reason that Makia Prime should have had to lose her life, especially not over being a potential threat. While these three men and so many others are able to be just fine. White adults receive greater sympathy, are held less accountable for their actions than black children. And this is adultification bias in action. This is where the idea that black children seem older than we are, that we pose greater threats than we do, and that we're more responsible for our actions has material impacts. And that needs to change. But any attempt to change the way things are has to start by acknowledging the problem at hand, by recognizing the biases we may hold internally and working to fight them. The In Defense of Girlhood program works in California to increase awareness of how adultification bias impacts kids, and gives advice to teachers as to how to fight it. To coaches, teachers, or parents who may be in the room with us today, work to acknowledge the bias you may have, whether in coaching, in teaching, or even here, in judging. Most of all, we need a change to our school systems. We need to fight the disciplinary methods of schooling that our systems rely on. Instead of resorting to suspensions, to methods that feed into the school-to-prison pipeline, it's time we begin de-escalation training for educators and officials alike. It's time that we begin hiring more black educators. According to the Thurgood Marshall College Fund in 2019, only 12% of public school educators across the country are black, compared to 35% of students. And a study from the Institute of Labor Economics shows that black students who had just one black teacher in high school were more likely to graduate and apply to universities. If we want to fight the impacts of adultification bias in our schooling system, it starts with putting black people in positions of authority and mentorship. The speakers in this room may not be in positions of power, but that doesn't mean that we can't advocate for those changes around us. We can't stand up for what's right and urge those in power to make the changes. Whether it be through campaigning for the right people to be put on the school board, for change to be made, or for the adults in the room to use your vote wisely when it comes to dictating the future of Americans across the board. We can stand up for change, even if we're not the ones making those decisions. To finally give children the chance to be a kid. From harsher punishments in school to increased encounters in law, black children are seen as older and more mature than we really are. Today, we took a trip to the playground and took a moment to examine the cause of this issue. We looked at how tiring the effects can be and what we can do to fight this bias in our day-to-day lives. Because black children simply don't get the opportunity to be children. And it's time to change that. Because being a kid shouldn't be a crime. And playing on the playground shouldn't mean playing with fire. Thank you.
Awesome, good job. Let's get to our fifth speaker, Christian.
Christian, yes.
Christian, okay. Thanks for correcting me.
Of course. Okay, can all judges see and hear me? Perfect. Is it okay if I keep my own time?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Am I good to begin? You know, I've always loved the holidays. Christmas was my Super Bowl and Santa was my Tom Brady. But on Christmas morning, 2007, disaster struck. I mentioned that the handwriting on my gifts looked suspiciously similar to my father's. I was then informed of a harsh reality. In that moment, Santa had died. And suddenly, my world went from It's a Wonderful Life to an Adele video. I began to mourn, and by Christmas dinner, my family was fed up. They said, "It's not like he's your family. I'm sorry, but that's enough." That's enough? Now, when it comes to mourning, there's a phrase we hear too often these days. Even amid a pandemic, racial division, and economic collapse, we challenge when, and even if we are allowed to mourn. And by questioning the validity of our grief, we force each other to justify behavior that is just human nature. In fact, in a recent survey of over 1,000 people recently grieving, Dr. Freya Khashoggi found that more than half felt expected to recover within 3 months. And on top of that, 81% of those grieving a pet, a friend, or even a distant cousin were expected to move on almost immediately. These alarming statistics expose our toxic definition of how to mourn, when to mourn, and whom to mourn. And whether it be the loss of a job, a friend, or a loved one, why must we question the credentials of those living with loss? So, let's unbox that and understand the impact of challenging first, whom we are allowed to mourn, second, how long we are allowed to mourn, before finally wrapping up with some solutions. After I learned Santa was a ho-ho hoax, I began to question all of my holiday idols. St. Patrick, the Easter Bunny, Christopher Columbus. Okay, he's real, but dead to me for other reasons. In every case, I asked myself the question that marks the first part of our problem. Did my relationship with them justify mourning? In reality, it totally depends. But online, there's a certain group that feels differently. That's right. Step aside, internet Karens. Here comes something even worse. The grief police, an online brigade that actually forces us to question who we are allowed to mourn. For example, after rock icon David Bowie's death, Sunday Times critic Camilla Long got all hot and bothered by people mourning online. She tweeted, "So many people crying or upset over Bowie. F you, you are an adult." She must be great at funerals. What Camila missed is that these Bowie lovers weren't crying for attention. They were forming a community of grief over someone they loved. And these parasocial relationships extend beyond popular culture. Can we mourn the lives lost in Kabul if we've never lived in Afghanistan? Can I mourn the loss of George Floyd if I'm neither Black nor the victim of police brutality? Or throughout this pandemic, are our frontline workers not allowed to mourn dying patients? When nurse Angela Scarpino lost her third patient to COVID in one night, she broke down. Yet Angela felt she wasn't allowed to mourn, saying, "If I can't hold it together, that scares the younger nurses." Because I was grieving, I felt so defeated. Though Angela was trained to only keep a professional relationship with her dying patients, she couldn't avoid feeling a human connection. So why must she feel shamed when she grieves their loss? As I continued to lament Santa's demise, Christmas became less Buddy the Elf and more Melania, the Trump. Other Christmas stuff. Who gives a heck about other Christmas stuff? That soundbite tortured me for months and forced me to ask our second question: why aren't we given enough time to mourn? Well, corporate America gives us no time at all. It was only until this April that President Biden introduced the American Families Plan, which, motivated by the loss of his own wife and children, would finally guarantee workers 3 days of bereavement leave. Other countries have given far more, but we Americans were promised nothing. And sure enough, critics are already saying 3 days is too long. How can that be? Well, we've been taught to confine our mourning to a 5-step framework, and we've cemented the stages like video game levels. Great, I just beat bargaining, now I've unlocked depression? However, the creator of these grieving stages, David Kessler, says they are not some stops on a linear timeline. Not everyone goes through them in a prescribed order. And that's an unfortunate error in our understanding. When we take tools for healing and enforce them as rules to follow, we set expectations no one should have to meet. Not even a year after the passing of Kobe Bryant and his daughter, the New York Daily News offered this headline: Vanessa Bryant, still struggling with loss? Of course she's still grieving. Psychotherapist Megan Devine explains, when we say someone is still grieving, what we're really trying to say is my time limit on understanding is running out. And that's the problem. Even though we ourselves are scrutinized for mourning, we do it to others. And I know that feeling. On April 8th, 2015, when I was 10 years old, my father passed away unexpectedly due to a heart attack. His death was shattering, and people were supportive at first. On the first Christmas without my father, that pit in my stomach returned. A relative called, and after learning I was having a hard time, offered the following advice. Christian, it's been over 6 months. It's time to move on. And I know he was your father, but your mother lost her husband. Those were words I was not expecting to hear. I began to question my own progress, my own grief. Did I even have the right to be sad? By questioning my own right to mourn, I had become part of the problem. I may not have been the source, but I still contributed to the syndrome. Today, however, I know I and we can be part of the solution. I still wonder, am I making progress? Yet I ask that question knowing that we can mourn for whomever we choose on our own schedule. We all deserve that right. So the only answer is to deck the halls with some solutions. First, for those who aren't mourning, some things just aren't about you. Psychologist Susan Silk devised an etiquette tool to address that, called ring theory. Draw a ring, and in it, put the name of the person experiencing the trauma. Now draw a larger ring around that with the people next closest to the trauma. Keep drawing as many rings as you need. Now, the person in the center can say anything to anyone. Everyone else can too, but only to people in larger rings. For people in larger rings, the goal is to simply help. Remember, dump out, comfort in. Next, for those who are mourning, embrace your struggle. We can all learn from the founder of the Hot Young Widows Club, Nora McInerney. During a TED Talk, she explained how she still refers to her late husband in the present tense, even if it makes people uncomfortable. Nora argues that we never move on. We don't finish the grief. Rather, we move forward at our own pace, on our own time. Fast forward to today, and the holidays are a much more nuanced time of the year. As I reflect on the end of my time with Santa, and also the loss of my father, I know I don't need permission to mourn, because Doctor Who author Jamie Anderson puts it best. Grief is just love with no place to go. And the love I still feel for both of them is my favorite gift on Christmas morning. Thank you.
Awesome, great job. And to finish out this finals round, let's go to our sixth speaker, Saketh.
Here, it's Saketh.
Saketh, sorry. Thank you for correcting me.
So I can keep my time, but I just like a type signal at 10, if that works. Just like a fist or something. Okay, cool. All right. At the age of 8, I had to wake up at 4 a.m. and cook for my 9 other siblings. Then, I had to climb the snowy Himalayas barefoot and along the way, I had to fight a bear with nothing but a stick. This was my dad's journey to school. And anytime I try to complain about how tough school is, I receive a barrage of his various heroic tales. But it's not just with school. I have to deal with this all the time. I don't like the food today. When I was your age, I had 5 grains of rice for lunch. Not 5 rice bowls. 5 rice grains. You get the point. I was constantly told that I had it much easier, that I should be grateful. Yet unfortunately, I'm not the only one who always has to hear this. And it gets much worse than my dad's harmless tales. We idolize gratitude as the antidote to all our afflictions. But the problem arises when we take it too far. Barbara Held, professor of psychology, calls it the tyranny of the positive attitude, where people are made to feel defective if they can't be grateful for what they have. And when someone has a genuine problem, be it a personal one or a systemic injustice, society instead weaponizes gratitude to deny them help. So today, let's set out on our journey as we look at how gratitude stops change in our world. Next, we'll scale the Himalayas as we delve into how it invalidates our own emotions. And finally, we'll reach the end as we discover some solutions to our attitude for gratitude. Now, don't get me wrong, gratitude is great at times. It's just what we're grateful for that's the problem. For example, Facebook recently released a report of what each day it was most uniquely grateful for. Iowa is grateful for sunsets. Alabama is grateful for God's forgiveness. And my home state, California, YouTube. Yeah, we put YouTube. Ultimately, the problem gets much worse than our state's interesting decisions, which brings me to my first concern. Society uses gratitude to stop change on both a personal and political level. Richard Ibach, assistant professor at Waterloo, explains that oftentimes gratitude is invoked to silence protests. It's why a recent Amazon union at Alabama's warehouse to combat inhumane working conditions failed. Amazon aggressively pushed the narrative that they already provided good jobs. Seriously, these are conditions like having too few bathroom breaks, an unsafe working environment, and grueling work burdens. But you ask, where was their fearless leader Jeff during all of this? Well, don't worry, he was showing his gratitude too. In space. Yeah, the billionaire CEO reportedly came down from a trip in space, completely ignored all of the complaints, and thanked his employees for working so hard. Because in his words, you paid for all of this. Gratitude is also why some people stay in abusive relationships. Because as professor of psychology Alex Wood of the London School of Economics explains, abusers can manipulate victims into feeling grateful when they say things like, "You're nothing without me." Folks, gratitude is everywhere you look. It's at the heart of many of the most pressing issues today, like the gender pay gap, which has made no progress in the last 15 years. Abby Wambach, retired soccer player and equal pay advocate, says she was so grateful to be one of the few women receiving a coveted ESPN award that she was afraid to demand equality. And she says her story is every woman's story. When people are out there fighting for change and we ignore them, we let the gravity of gratitude drag them down. Now, the second way our problem pans out is when we use gratitude to invalidate necessary emotions. It's what talk show host Charlie Kirk did when he called Simone Biles selfish after she withdrew from the Olympics due to her mental health. Kirk said that many other gymnasts would love to take her place. as if she should ignore the years of abuse from her Olympic doctor Larry Nassar for the sake of being grateful. It's also why Asian Americans are less likely to get help for their mental health. DJ Ida, Executive Director at the National Asian American Pacific Islander Mental Health Association, notes that Asian Americans can think their problems are burdens to their parents because of a strong sense of gratitude for all the hard work their parents have already done. Gratitude shouldn't mask calls for help, but we let it do just that for so many people, including survivors of school shootings. Zach Cartaya, survivor of the Columbine school shooting, says he saw other people who came out worse and thought he couldn't complain. He felt the pressure to feel grateful for not being physically hurt. But he explains that there is no comparison between physical and invisible wounds. If you go down that road, it leads you to a really ugly place. Only after years of struggling with anxiety, only after contemplating suicide, only after almost a decade did he finally seek help. When gratitude hides our true emotions and denies us the opportunity to confront our situation, it starts controlling us. It started controlling me. Now, I have been doing piano for almost a decade now, and it's one of the few activities I'm truly passionate about. But it wasn't always like that. This March, the annual exam had rolled around, and I told myself I had to do good no matter what. I stopped relaxing. I stopped doing other things I loved. I stopped being happy. Until piano was in the driver's seat of my life. Yet I remember countless other people saying that I was lucky to have talent. I thought being grateful for that talent meant doing my best to ace the test. But in reality, I didn't know where to draw the line. And one night, after another 5 hours of practice, I broke down and started crying. I realized that somewhere along the way, I stopped playing for myself. Gratitude became a weapon used against me, forcing me behind a mask of happiness. But it's not just me. Far too many of us are locked behind jails of silence. And I think it's time we break free. It starts by recognizing that sometimes we just shouldn't be grateful. When you know someone who's struggling, from that one friend who always gets good grades to that other friend who seems to have it all, don't tell them to be grateful. Sympathize with them and try and understand what it is they're actually going through. Next, we must stop using downward comparisons so frequently. These occur when we compare ourselves to those in worse situations. In the process, we invalidate our own emotions. Family therapist Connie Habash explains gratitude isn't about who has it worse or better. It's about finding what we can appreciate. And finally, we must learn to recognize the complexities of our emotions by getting rid of the either or, the idea that we cannot feel both gratitude and negative emotions at the same time. Psychologist and author Nikisha Hammond explains that you can have both a strong sense of gratitude along with feelings of sadness, confusion, or even anxiety. What does that look like? Well, it means you can be grateful for having a job at Amazon while still pushing for humane working conditions. And it means you can be grateful for being the only woman at the table while still fighting for equal pay. Like my dad in his childhood days, we've all just embarked on a journey. And while it won't be as tough as scaling the Himalayas, it'll still be a big change. But when we reach our destination, we'll finally understand. what true gratitude is. Thank you.
Yay, great job. And great job to everyone in this round. Congratulations again to making it to finals. Give yourself a round of applause. Drink some water and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for judging.
Thank you for judging.
Thank you so much for judging.
Thank you.